My grandmother told me never to visit a cemetery after sunset, but I thought those were just old superstitions. This happened 3 years ago in Kyoto at the old Otani Cemetery near Kiyomizu-dera. I was a university student then, always staying up late, walking home at strange hours. The cemetery was on my usual route back to the dormitory. Most nights, I'd take the long way around, but that Tuesday, I was exhausted. The main path cut right through the graveyard. It would save me 15 minutes. The moon was bright that night, casting long shadows between the weathered headstones. Everything seemed peaceful, almost beautiful. I was halfway through when I heard it. Soft crying coming from somewhere ahead. A woman's voice, muffled by grief. I stopped walking. The crying continued, steady, heartbroken sob. I should have turned around right then, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, made me continue forward. Through the maze of graves I saw her, a woman in a white kimono, kneeling before a headstone. Her long black hair fell like a curtain, hiding her face. She was placing white chrysanthemums on the grave, each flower placed with such careful, loving precision. I felt bad for intruding on her grief, so I tried to walk quietly past, but as I drew closer, something felt wrong. The air grew cold, unnaturally, and there was a smell, like old incense mixed with decay. When I was directly behind her, she spoke without turning around. "Do you think he can see the flower?" Her voice was hollow, empty. I stammered something about being sorry for her loss. She laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. "My loss," she whispered. Slowly, so slowly, she began to turn toward me. I ran before I could see her face. The next morning, I checked the cemetery record. The grave she was visiting had been empty for 3 years. The nameplate read her own name. She'd been bringing flowers to her own grave every night since her funeral. My friend Kenji works as a groundskeeper at Yanaka Cemetery in Tokyo. He's been there for over 20 years, seen things most people wouldn't believe. But this story, this one still makes his hands shake when he tells. It was during the Obon Festival last August. The cemetery was busier than usual, families coming to honor their ancestors. Kenji was working the night shift, making sure everything was secure. Around 2 a.m. he noticed something odd. A man in a dark suit was walking between the graves, carrying a briefcase. Strange time for a visitor, but people grieve differently. Kenji watched from a distance as the man stopped at a grave. He opened his briefcase and pulled out office paper. The man began reading aloud quarterly report, budget analyses. His voice carried across the silent cemetery. "The merger went through, Dad, just like you planned." Kenji thought it was touching, son updating his father on the family business. But then the man's voice changed, became frustrated. "Why won't you answer me?" he shouted. "I've been coming here every night for 6 months." Kenji decided to approach. Maybe the man needed help. As he got closer, he could read the headstone. The dates showed the person had died in 1987, but the man looked maybe 40 years old. "Excuse me," Kenji called softly. The man turned around, and Kenji saw his face clearly. Hollow eyes, skin like old paper. "He won't talk to me," the man said. "This is his grave, isn't it?" Kenji looked at the headstone again, read the name carefully. It was the same as the man standing before him. "Sir," Kenji whispered, this is your grave." The man looked confused, then terrified. "But I have a meeting tomorrow. The board expects my report." He looked down at his hands, and they were beginning to fade. "I've been dead for 37 years, he realized, and I'm still trying to finish my work. There's an old cemetery in the mountains near Takayama that most locals avoid. It's been abandoned for decades. No one tends the graves anymore. But there's still a keeper there, has been for 50 years. Last autumn, my hiking group got lost during a mountain. The sun was setting, and we were running out of time. That's when we found the narrow path leading up the mountainside. At the top, we discovered the cemetery, rows of ancient stones covered in moss. Some of the graves looked centuries old. We were about to set up camp nearby when an old man appeared. He emerged from a small hut we hadn't noticed before. "You can't stay here," he said firmly. "The dead don't like visitors after dark." We explained we were lost, needed shelter for the night. The old man's face grew serious. "You don't understand," he whispered. "This place, it's not like other cemeteries." He pointed to the oldest section, where the headstones were cracked and tilting. Those were plague victims from the Edo period. They were buried in haste, without proper ritual. Their spirits never found peace. As if summoned by his words, a cold wind began to blow. The temperature dropped so quickly we could see our breath. "They're waking up," the old man said urgently. "You need to leave now." But it was already too late. From between the graves, shapes began to rise, pale figures in tattered burial clothes moving toward us. The old man grabbed a bundle of ofuda from his hut. "Stay behind me," he shouted, waving the paper talisman. The spirits hesitated, but only for a moment. "Run," the keeper yelled. "I'll hold them back." We ran down the mountain path in the darkness. Behind us, we could hear the old man chanting an inhuman wailing. We never saw the cemetery keeper again. But every night, locals say you can still hear his voice on the mountain, warning travelers, protecting the living from the restless dead. Every cemetery has rules, but some rules exist for reasons you don't want to discover. This story comes from my cousin who works at a memorial company in Nagoya. They design and install headstones, usually a straightforward job. But 3 months ago, they received an unusual order. A family wanted to replace their grandfather's headstone. The original had been damaged, or so they claim. When my cousin arrived at the cemetery to remove the old stone, he found something strange. The headstone wasn't damaged at all, but it was different from the other. The stone was darker, rougher, like it had been carved from different material, and the inscription was wrong. Instead of the grandfather's name, it showed a woman's name, someone who had died 50 years before the grandfather was even born. My cousin called the family to clarify. The grandson answered. His voice was shaking. "Just remove it," he begged. "Please, just take it away." When my cousin pressed for details, the grandson finally confessed. Grandfather's headstone disappeared 3 weeks after the funeral. This one appeared in its place. Every night we hear her calling from the grave. She wants us to find her real resting place. My cousin agreed to remove the stone, but when he tried to lift it, it wouldn't budge. The stone felt like it was rooted deep into the earth. He brought heavy equipment, jackhammer, hydraulic lift. Nothing worked. That night he decided to stay late and research the woman's name. In the cemetery records, he found her original burial site, plot 47, section C, about 50 meters away. When he walked to that location, he found an empty grave. The earth was disturbed, as if something had clawed its way out. And there, half buried in the dirt, was the grandfather's missing headstone. The dead woman had traded graves with him. She'd been waiting 50 years for someone to take her place. Some people say that spirits are strongest at the moment between night and dawn. This is why my grandmother always warned me never to be the last person in a cemetery. I should have listened to her. Last December, I was visiting my father's grave in Kamakura. It was the anniversary of his death, 5 years exactly. I'd been working late, stuck in meetings all day. By the time I arrived at the cemetery, it was almost closing time. The security guard warned me they locked the gates at 6 p.m. I promised I'd be quick. I cleaned Father's headstone, left fresh flowers, said my prayer. But I lost track of time, thinking about memories, sharing stories with him. When I finally looked up, the sun had completely set. The cemetery was empty, eerily quiet. I hurried toward the main gate, but it was already locked. The security booth was dark, no one around. I was trapped inside. I tried calling for help, but my phone had no signal. So I decided to wait by the gate until morning. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Other people were moving through the cemetery, dozens of them. They walked between the graves in perfect silence. Some carried flowers, others brought food offerings. They all seemed to know exactly where they were going. I followed one of them, an elderly woman in a faded kimono. She knelt at a grave and began speaking softly to the headstone. "I'm sorry I missed visiting hours again, Mike. They always close too early before I can make the journey." That's when I understood. These weren't living people. They were spirits, coming to visit their own families after hours. The cemetery had 2 shifts, day for the living, night for the dead. One of them noticed me watching. A young man in a school uniform, he looked confused. "You're not supposed to be here," he said gently. "This time belongs to us." He walked me to a side gate I hadn't noticed before. "Your father asked me to tell you something," he said as I left. "He's proud of you, but you don't need to visit so often. He can see you just fine from where he is now." The next morning, I called the cemetery to ask about the side gate. They told me there was no side gate. There never had been.